You see their face again and it loads instantly. Their name doesn't follow, and that gap feels too clean to explain. It's not a memory failure in the way you think it is. You're standing in a small group near a doorway. Someone walks in, smiles, and stops right in front of you. You've met them before, maybe twice, maybe more. They say something familiar. You respond right on time. Your face looks perfectly normal from the outside, but inside there is a pause you don't show. Their name is simply not available. You shift your weight slightly to one side. Your eyes briefly check the room behind them. Not because you're distracted, but because you're searching for an exit that looks natural. You remember their voice, their last conversation, even a small detail they shared. But the name never appears when you need it. And you start managing how to look like you already know it. There is a split second where you decide not to ask. That decision changes the entire interaction tone. What feels like a simple memory lapse actually starts much earlier than recall. It starts in how your attention behaves while the name is being given to you. Stay with this carefully, because the mistake is usually misattributed. And to see that clearly, we need to look at the exact moment the social performance begins. You've met them before, maybe several times. They're walking straight toward you, with a smile that says they are completely ready for a conversation. You recognize that face instantly, and your brain immediately connects it to a flood of familiar memories. But there is a dead space hovering right over their shoulder, right where their name is supposed to be. Gone. It's not on the tip of your tongue, it simply does not exist. Instantly, you flip into survival mode and start scanning your brain for escape routes. You pray that someone else will walk up and say their name first. You secretly think about pretending to check your contacts or finding a way to avoid introducing them to the person you're with. Your facial recognition system is working perfectly, but your retrieval system has completely collapsed. This panic doesn't happen because you forgot. It happens because you know you are supposed to remember. A casual interaction suddenly turns into a high-stakes performance. Your attention has left the conversation before it even starts because you're too busy holding up your mask. The awkward part isn't forgetting, it's pretending you didn't. And what most people assume about that moment is completely wrong. The problem starts much earlier than you think. Let's go back to the exact moment you meet someone completely new. In those first few seconds, your brain is running at maximum capacity to process dozens of things all at once. It's analyzing their face, reading their expression, decoding their voice, and assessing the social context. At the exact same time, you're already busy calculating what you should say next so you don't look awkward. And right in the middle of that total cognitive overload, they drop the anchor. "Hi, I'm Kevin." Your brain mutters, "Okay, Kevin." That's it. The name enters your mind as an isolated sound, with absolutely no meaningful connections attached to it. In psychology, this points directly to a famous experiment known as the Baker-Baker paradox. The paradox shows that if you tell someone a man is a baker by trade, their brain remembers it easily because it triggers associations of smells, kitchens, and warm bread. But if you tell them the man's last name is Baker, the brain quickly wipes it out, because a name carries no inherent meaning. Less than greater than. Your brain remembers meaning before labels. The very piece of information people expect you to remember most is the one least supported by your actual memory system. But memory overload isn't the whole story. This is where it gets a little more personal. Sometimes, the name disappears not because your memory is failing, but because your attention never fully arrived in the first place. Watch yourself closely during a conversation. You are busy monitoring your eye contact, adjusting your facial expression, timing your nods, and checking your tone of voice. You are even rehearsing your response before they're even finished talking. Your mind isn't looking out. It is quietly turning inward with a single question. Am I acting normal? You're already gone. In behavioral science, this is known as the next-in-line effect. Your brain begins preparing the output before it even finishes processing the input. It focuses on how you will perform next instead of absorbing what is happening right in front of you. On the surface, the conversation feels present and flowing. But in reality, your attention is completely vacant. You thought you were listening, you were monitoring, and that's where the entire explanation changes. Here is the part most people never consider. Let's look back at the forgotten name moment, but this time, not from the perspective of memory, but through the lens of attention. Your mind wonders, I heard it, so why don't I know it? Different problem. Self-awareness under social pressure completely consumes your brain's cognitive bandwidth. When the name is spoken, it never actually receives full encoding into your system. You constantly blame your memory for failures that were actually caused by your attention. You don't have a memory problem, you have an attention problem, and that changes how you interpret the entire experience. There is another side to this story. Let's look at it from the perspective of the other person the exact moment they realize you forgot their name. A tiny pause, a small correction, and a brief flash of disappointment. Their mind instantly whispers, "Oh, they don't remember me." That's the sting. The human brain constantly converts forgotten names into social meaning. What they actually hear isn't that you lost a word, but rather, you didn't matter. A simple failure of your memory system suddenly becomes a negative relationship signal. People rarely experience forgotten names as memory errors. They experience them as a rejection. And that hurt happens even when the reason you forgot has absolutely nothing to do with their worth. But memory was never storing events the way people imagine. Memory isn't a filing cabinet. It doesn't organize and store information perfectly the way we assume it does. Years later, you can still clearly remember a laugh, a story, a facial expression, or even a strange opinion they shared. But you cannot remember the name. Your mind wonders, I remember everything about them except their name, not the label. Many chronic name forgetters actually remember the texture of a person rather than their procedural identity. Your memory system naturally prioritizes emotion, relevance, association, and novelty. What survives in memory reveals what actually received your attention. The cost is that you appear completely inattentive, even when you retained everything that felt truly meaningful and human about them. Which leads to one final misunderstanding. The irony is difficult to notice from the inside. Let's return to the original forgotten name scene. The same person is standing in front of you, but this time you face a completely different interpretation. Your mind shifts slightly. Maybe this wasn't the story I told myself. Here's the irony. Attention shapes how your brain encodes information, and that encoding strictly determines what survives in your memory. Some people forget names because they're too busy experiencing themselves. You are too focused on how you are performing, worrying if you are acting normal. The price of this defensive mechanism is years of unnecessary shame. Forgetting a name doesn't prove that you are selfish or that you didn't care. It simply reveals exactly where your attention was living in that moment. It was never about whether you remembered the name. It was about what your attention was doing in that exact moment when the name entered the room. Most memory failures people notice are actually attention placements they never reviewed. You're not someone who just forgets names. You're someone who stays slightly inside yourself while things are happening around you. Not distant, not careless, just internally occupied during social moments. The name was never the main thing you missed. Think about the last time you forgot someone's name you had met before. Not what you felt afterward. What were you paying attention to right before it disappeared? If this kind of psychology feels uncomfortably familiar, you'll recognize the next one too. Some details vanish quietly, not because they were unimportant, but because something else was holding your attention first.